right, everyone. We are down to two very exciting sessions this afternoon. This next one is Strengthening European Cooperation, Security Access on the Continent. This session, these speakers will discuss the role Europe can play in promoting peace and democracy across the region and how deeper cooperation can contribute to a more secure and stable Europe. Please welcome to the stage Her Excellency Kolinda Grabar Kitarović, former President of Croatia, and Her Excellency Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the President-elect of Belarus, and Ali Aslan.
It's 19 minutes.
There you have it. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. I know we were actually supposed to be the session right before this, but traffic during UN General Assembly during UNGA can be quite tricky at times. But I'm very thrilled nonetheless, despite the obstacles, that we are now complete and off for a very, very intriguing and timely conversation. Kolinda, let me start with you. Obviously, when we're talking about European security these days, there's no way around speaking and talking about Ukraine. It's my understanding you were actually in Ukraine last week. Share with us some of the impression that you came away with. How's the situation on the ground right now?
Will do. Let me just say one thing.
Sure.
Kudos to Sviatlana as woman to woman for her courage and determination to change things in Belarus. And I wish you all the best and all the success. So I spent about 10 days in Ukraine last time. I visit regularly as someone who grew through the war and the post-war reconciliation and rebuilding in Croatia, and then through the NATO and EU accession process. I work with Ukrainians in order to assist them in a number of areas. The situation right now is rather complex. As we're looking at a difficult situation where Russia continues to make gains, small but steady and incremental, on the contact line between the occupied territories and the rest of Ukraine. And we have seen a lot of discussion and debate around the world when it comes to support to Ukraine. The ultimate solution, the only viable solution, is for Ukraine to win this war, and it's not important just for Ukraine, but for all of us, because this war is not about NATO expansion, as it was said, or a threat against Russia. Putin, as a matter of fact, he understands only force and strength, but when it comes to military strength, he thinks he can deal with that and understands that NATO would not want to get into a direct conflict with Russia and would not want to attack Russia. However, what he's afraid of is values. And if you look back at 2014, how things started in Ukraine with the hybrid warfare, it was not provoked by NATO enlargement, but as a matter of fact by the EU. So the values and the changes, the democratic changes that the EU brings to the countries are that would move further to the Russian border is what he's truly afraid of. And of course, behind it all being the idea of imperialism and the restoration of the Russian sphere of influence, or the empire.
Of course, if we're talking about European security, as we intend to throughout the next 15 minutes, Europe faces a very critical moment for peace and stability, which we took in Europe for granted for many, many decades, certainly post-45. Reality now is very much back at the very latest since Russia's attacks against Ukraine in 2022. And before I come to you, Sviatlana, let me just follow up quickly. Sometimes when you talk to European leaders, they speak about some forms of war fatigue in their various countries and capitals. Is that something that, as a woman, as a former politician who also travels all across the continent, is that something that you sense as well?
I do, unfortunately. Ukraine has become business as usual, and they're in the third a year of fighting for their lives, for their existence. And when people call for a ceasefire, they have to remember that there is a very easy solution to end this war. If Russia stops attacking, the war stops. If Ukraine stops fighting, it ceases to exist as an independent and sovereign country. And that is exceptionally important for all of our countries, because Putin is not going to stop there. He's got ambitions that go way beyond that. Looking ahead in the next weeks and especially months, as Russia continues to pound Ukraine's infrastructure, especially energy infrastructure, there will be problems not just with heating and with having no electricity in the daily lives of Ukrainians, but I expect that there will be food supply chain disruptions, and that will drive a number of Ukrainians towards the West, towards our own countries, and combined with the fact that migrations, illegal migrations, first and foremost, have become the dominating issue in the European Union, combined with the pressure of migrations from Ukraine, it's going to increase that war fatigue. And that's one of the ways that Russia wages a war of attrition, both in Ukraine, physically, and on the rest of us to be able to lose that collective will to continue to insist on Ukraine, on assistance to Ukraine, and for more people to ask for a ceasefire. A ceasefire would just provide Russia with buying time to reconstitute the forces. And I will quote what Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, said in Washington just recently. If there is a ceasefire, we have to make sure that it breaks the cycle of Russia's aggression.
Yeah, and how and when this war is finally over remains to be seen, war fatigue or not. Of course, we're talking about Ukraine. Ukraine has been very much dominating the headlines for the better part of the last 2.5 years, Sviatlana. But of course, there's another country that has felt the negative impact of Russian influence, and that is your country, that is Belarus, of course. I think your persona and your story needs very little introduction at this particular point. You have become a household name. But for those very few who may not be familiar with Belarus and your story in particular, let's go back just in time for a bit. Your story is remarkable. It's very fascinating. You were a woman, a family person with 2 kids in Belarus when your husband, who got involved politically and challenged President Lukashenko, actually somebody named him the last dictator in Europe. And even the word president, I know you just tricked there for a second. I believe this is your husband, yeah. Is that correct? Who's now incarcerated. Obviously, he's feeling the repercussions. And that episode thrust you into the spotlight, which you have, as Kolinda pointed out, bravely embraced against your will, without any planning. You are now the face, in many ways, of the opposition to Lukashenko. What is the situation on the ground in Belarus these days? Any signs of hope?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I absolutely don't mind when you pay so much attention to Ukraine. I fully support this, because the fate of Belarus, my country, and fate of Ukraine are interconnected. I'm absolutely sure that without free Ukraine, there will be no free Belarus. But also vice versa, without free and democratic Belarus, there will be constant threat to our neighboring Ukraine and Western countries. So we have to see both our countries in complex and look at Belarus not only as a problem, but also as a part of solution. Because people in Belarus are very much united against dictatorship, very much united against imperialistic ambitions of Russia, and very much united for Ukraine. So for 4 years already, since 2020, Belarus remains Gulag. It's like Stalin's time era, because repressions going on constantly, number of political prisoners increasing, those who are against Lukashenko, or those who are supporting Ukrainian fighters, or our Belarusian military volunteers who are fighting shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians, supporting political prisoners, they are considered to be enemies of this regime, and they are persecuted. those who fled Belarus, and it's about 500,000 at the moment, we can be more vocal, we can be more active, though our relatives also suppressed, though our property is confiscated in Belarus, but still we have more possibilities. So, and our task to promote Belarusian cause, to explain to the world that Russia looks on Belarus and Ukraine as on naughty children who don't have right to choose their future themselves, and they want to drag us back into the Soviet Union past. And we Belarusians, we are part of Europe. We want to return to our family, European family of countries. So, and that's why we have shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians and all democratic world, to fight for both our countries. Of course, we are not asking, and Ukrainians are not asking to do our job instead of us. We are asking to help us fulfill what we have to do. We need solidarity. Ukrainians need weapons, to fight. So you powerful democratic countries, you have possibility to help your neighbors. And you asked about fatigue. It's so interesting for me because I'm already 4 years in very difficult fight, with constant pain and fears and, sufferings. And when people talk about fatigue, I think, look, if, for example, you are, your neighbor's house is in fire, burning, and you are sleeping in your house. Of course, it's more comfortable, to sleep in cozy bed, not thinking what's going on. But if you don't help your neighbor, the fire will be on your house. What are you going to do then? So it's moral obligation of every powerful leader, of every person, not to be poisoned by this narrative of fatigue, and help those who are in need.
And interestingly enough, of course, when your husband tragically was incarcerated and in prison, you stepped up. Yeah. You challenged Lukashenko, and this is why many of your supporters and parts of the international community actually consider you to be the rightful president-elect of the Republic of Belarus. Would you say in New York, of course, now where you're meeting many of the world leaders, do you feel the solidarity? Do you feel the support from the heads of state that have gathered here in New York, whom you're meeting personally?
Of course, through all these years, I feel support and solidarity from European Union, from the USA, Canada, UK, all democratic states. And of course, it helps us a lot. People who are fighting, they need to recharge their battery constantly. And every act of solidarity, every act of assistance, or act of pressure on Lukashenko's regime, it helps us to recharge our battery and continue to fight. But I have to say that sometimes, people are,
hesitant?
Words of condemnation is not enough. Sometimes actions are so important, to see. And I think the democratic world doesn't use all the tools they have, to help Belarusians and Ukrainians. It's about accountability, it's about assistance, it's about solidarity, it's about fatigue, So I think that, we have to think strategically, and don't let ourselves, to feel, this fatigue, and think that is their war, is their dictatorship, is their problems. If in one country dictatorship is ruling and prevailing, so it's poisoning other leaders, other countries as well.
Yeah, in the meantime, you are living in exile in Vilnius in Lithuania, waiting, of course, for the situation in Belarus to change. Not much time left, unfortunately. It's winding down, but I do want to touch upon the US election here for a second, obviously because it is an election of great significance to this country, but also to Europe. Kolinda, we know former President Trump's past statements about potentially not respecting Article 5 commitments, but he's been pressing the EU to increase their autonomous defense capabilities for many, many years, the 2% threshold, and so on and so forth. Europe may have been caught off guard, like most of the world, for his first term. Is Europe better prepared this time for a potential second Trump term?
I believe so. Of course, it's not our choice. So it's the choice of the American people. Whoever
Of course.
gets elected, we will have to manage the transatlantic relationship. However, I do have to say that any president will ultimately be aware of the fact that what happens in Ukraine very much affects the United States as well. If Ukraine loses this war, it sets a huge precedent because the public perception is that the United States, the European Union, and some other countries are heavily invested in this war. So should Ukraine lose, it would set a precedent that the West, that NATO, the transatlantic community, that we're defeatable. And then you set a parallel to what I believe is the primary relationship for any US president, and that is the relationship with China. Then it encourages China and other states who have different thinking in authoritarian measures and would like to spread their ideas, that any aggression will go, that ultimately they will succeed, that they can wait us out. And this must not happen. So again, the victory in Ukraine, and Ukraine remaining a sovereign and independent country with the right to choose their political future, will be foremost on the agenda. There's one thing with which I always agreed with President Trump, and that is the 2%, because it was our commitment. We all committed to that at the Wales Summit. And we did not stick to that commitment. We were not doing our job in Europe. We were not building the defense industrial base. And you now see the repercussions because we're not able to provide enough ammunition and armaments to Ukraine and keep our own ammunition stocks available as well. And there's all sorts of procurement rules that affect that as well. Now, looking at the future, a lot of countries, most countries have achieved the 2%, but that's going to become the floor, not the ceiling any longer, but the floor, because we're fighting, I think, $150 billion defense budget in Russia. They are, in spite of the fact that their technology is perhaps not as developed as the Western technology, there's sheer mass of human resources that is much bigger than Ukraine's, and sheer mass of weapons production, ammunition productions. And let me also remind that President Trump actually did not question the value of Article 5, but he pointed to the fact that the countries who are affected most should invest a lot more into their own security and into their own neighborhood. So I agree we have to keep to our commitments, and I agree that increased defense investment, not spending, is investing into our future. It's like investing into insurance.
And that is actually something that even his fiercest critics would acknowledge, that he did force the Europeans to take a long and hard look in the mirror when it comes to propping up their own defense capabilities.
And he does not question Ukraine's right to self-defense. He does not question Ukraine's ability to choose their own future.
He does not, but his statements...
And he has provided some of the weapons earlier, such as the Javelin, for instance, to Ukraine. So yes, we will have to work with whoever is elected, but we will have to do our part of the work as well.
That's without any doubt. Judging by his words, President Trump's words, and Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance's words, they want an end. They want an end, and a quick end to the war in Ukraine. That's how I understood them. But Sviatlana, before we go, looking into the future, also when you talk to your American colleagues and counterparts and people who are in charge here, what is your understanding with the upcoming elections? When you talk to them, is Belarus on their agenda? Are there signs of hope for positive change in your country?
There is no hope about Belarus. It's absolutely sure that Belarus will be free and democratic. The question is when and how. And of course, we need strong allies on our path. And I want to believe that regardless who will be new president of the USA, the policy regarding Belarus and Ukraine will not change because it will be betrayal of values. And I don't believe that American nation can betray the values their country is based on.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps you can hold up the photo of your husband again. I see it, the audience can't see it. Still in prison in Belarus, and hoping, of course, for a good ending in your country, a happy end for you personally, but of course also your country. And Kolinda, of course, for Europe in these very critical times vis-a-vis Ukraine, but also in the geopolitical context that we are all finding ourselves with. Ladies and gentlemen, Kolinda Grabar Kitarović and Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. This is your applause. Much appreciated.
Thank you.